You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmulik Blackman, a high school Rebbe and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. In this episode, we hear from our very first anonymous guest telling his ADHD story. If you're considering whether or not this is something you'd like to do, hopefully this can be a good gauge, though there is an additional option to have the producer change your voice, which today's guest declined. Additionally, I forgot to mention to him to translate any Hebrew terms that he used, so if there's any confusion, you can shoot me an email. Our anonymous guest today used the alias Rabbi Shmulik Blackman and had so much to share in his story that we split it into 2 installments. The second installment is not going to be our next episode, but it'll be released a while after. In this installment, we discussed Rabbi Shmulik Blackman's school years through his early career. He talks about boredom, struggling to juggle learning different skills, the teachers who understood him, finding a good mentor, deciding to join the Chassidic community, imposter syndrome, and a lot more. I think the main value of this part of his story is hearing what his experience was like, especially since he didn't have a diagnosis until adulthood. He tells his story with quite a bit of flair, to say the least, and it may be a little over the top at times, but to me, I think that's also a part of his story. If there's any part of the story that resonates with you that you think was not sufficiently highlighted, you can send me an email and perhaps we'll mention it before the next installment. My email is in the show notes. Thanks again for listening and enjoy. Rabbi Shmulik Blackman, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm excited for our conversation today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for reaching out. I really like talking, especially about ADHD and personal growth, and this is going to be a great opportunity for me to just have a great time talking with an expert.
Perfect. Okay, looking forward. Let's get right to it. So a little bit about yourself and what you do.
All right. So considering that I'm going under an anonymous identity over here, I grew up in Oklahoma City, which is going to be a code for where I live. Again, I'm not embarrassed about anything that I'm saying here today. It's just that it's a little bit personal, and I don't need everybody in the city where I live to know every detail about my life. If anybody wants to come to me privately and discuss their life with me, that's fine. But putting it out on the great World Wide Web, it's always good to be a little bit prudent. So, Shmulik Blackman from Oklahoma City. Okay, so in Oklahoma City, I moved there when I was 3 years old, Baal Tshuva background. And when I was a little bit older, around 9, we moved there and I switched schools in between. Went from more of a day school to more like a cheder type of place. There's definitely a lot to talk about the difference between the schools, the difference between the chinuch, and so on, and just switching from, especially coming from a Baal Tshuva background, not really knowing that much, and going from the day school environment to the cheder environment, where the olam is very yeshivish, and they're flying in and doing the 5-day drive from Oklahoma City to New York and Lakewood and so on. A lot of differences there, just culturally and learning on the fly. What my experience was like in school again. And then eventually, after I graduated from elementary school, went into Yeshiva Katana, went to probably the most Yeshiva Katana in Oklahoma City. How I got there, whatever, that's where I ended up. Did not do very well, did not hit the ball out of the park at all. Probably due to ADHD, although I did not really think that I had it then. And we'll get back to that. In my 3rd year of yeshiva, sort of decided to switch tracks and got into more of a Chassidic type of vibe. There was a small Chassidic community in OKC. And as I got into that, became like my identity, and I latched onto it and left and went out of town and went to New York. Actually, I went out overseas, somewhere overseas for yeshiva for half a year, and then went back to New York. I went to yeshiva, and I went through a lot of growth and change during that time. Obviously, ADHD was there the entire time. Still didn't know it. Then yeshiva there for probably 2.5 years, and then eventually I got married, went to Kollel. 2 years into Kollel, I had 2 babies. My wife wasn't working, and not a lot of money coming in, so I got a job, and then started the carousel of jobs, which is a hallmark of ADHD. And we'll have to come back to and go more detail to each aspect, but it brings us to where I am nowadays, working back in my good old hometown of OKC in a cheder, not the cheder that I went to, not the other cheder that I went to, but a third cheder that I'm now in, which is a great place. The manal there really, he reached out to me and he built me up and gave me a great opportunity. And I worked there from the morning till the afternoon, taking care of all sorts of different roles in the cheder. So that's a little bit of a background. Obviously, we need to spend a lot more time going into details.
Okay, great. Thank you. What is the earliest memory that you associate with ADHD?
So considering that ADHD is a condition where you forget a lot of things, that's a hard thing to pinpoint. Definitely a hard thing to pinpoint. There's experiences that I wasn't like, that's ADHD. Let me go back to ADHD. When I was a kid, we just knew that there were these wild, hyper kids who destroyed people. There was one kid in my second cheder who every once in a while he would go berserk and tear people to pieces. He would just like start scratching and clawing. And then one day he didn't. And somebody said, what's going on? So I said, oh, he's on Ritalin. What's Ritalin? Sounds like a riddle. I had no idea what it was. Like, no, it's a drug. It calms him down. I go, okay.
This was as an adult? This was when you were an
This
adult?
was not as an adult. This was when I was in probably grade 6 in my contemporary, a boy in my class who was a similar age to me, who used to go and beat people up and lose it and scream and shout and climb the walls. And one day he wasn't. Like, okay, so they gave him drugs. Like, you can imagine, like, you tranquilize a bear or a tiger. They must have tranquilized this boy. And there was no way in the world that I was on the same page as this boy. I had my issues, but I wasn't going around scratching people and biting people and screaming. His shirt was always untucked. His face was red. His hair was flying. He was a real character, buttons popping off of his shirt. Like textbook ADHD, hyperactive, all the way.
Right.
The ADD, non-attentive, like nobody knew about that. It wasn't really spoken about. We're talking early 2000s. It wasn't really a thing. But what were my earliest experiences with ADHD? Obviously, school is going to have a lot to do with it. People with ADHD cannot stand being bored. Boredom, it drives you absolutely crazy. You cannot be bored. So obviously, I have a lot of memories of trying not to be bored, drawing on the fridge with a marker a lot. I would doodle a lot in class, pictures all the time. One time, I remember in grade 3, my Rebbe was making a Haggadah. It was like one of these like month-long pre-Pesach projects. We had to work on one page at a time. And at the end, you would put it together, you have a beautiful Haggadah. And like that's poison for ADHD, especially like just the executive function required to fill out the papers and put the paper away and then bring it back out at the time that Rebbe's going to put it together. And I started to get a lot of anxiety, started to panic that the Rebbe's going to catch on that I'm not doing the papers, I'm not keeping them. When it came time to bring all the papers out for them to be turned into a book, I just took any random paper on my desk. There were probably math sheets and letters about book sales. Who knows what was in there, pages covered with food, and just gave it to me. Sort of rolled it on. He was going to call me out. We just bound it together and I took it home. And I thought that he was really foolish for not catching on. But obviously I think he was a smart Rebbe, and it was actually his first year teaching.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, but he gets a lot of points for not busting me on that.
Have you seen him as an adult? Have you seen him since then?
Yeah, I've seen him all the time. Yeah, he's a good man. He didn't really know what to do with me. Again, I wasn't like the worst kid in the class, and especially in the younger grades. ADHD, non-hyperactive, in the younger grades, it's rarely caught, right? Yeah. Because the kid, he's not making trouble. He's just sort of smiling to himself, he looks out the window, watching the clouds go by. Everybody's telling the story of the parsha he spaced in, then he spaces out, spaces back again. He's not getting into a lot of fights. He loses his things, but it's very, very easy for him to go under the radar. So I think a lot of what you can say about me is going under the radar. I didn't radar, but there was a lot of stuff that maybe nowadays would be caught by a Rebbe who was very savvy and knew a lot about ADHD, right. And maybe things would have been a little different, but then I wouldn't be who I am now.
That's an interesting insight. I like that.
Life is a journey. You need to go through different experiences and see who you are. I think the Mordechai Shapiro song or A.B. Rottenberg or somebody, many people sing it, right?
Excellent. Yeah, I'm sure many songs is written about that idea. Okay, anything else you want to say about elementary school? What the elementary school experience is?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, as I said, like kindergarten was pretty fun. Younger grades were okay. Older grades were pretty bad. And I tried to figure out if there was like a pattern. I think that I did better in odd years than in even years in school, because I look back at a pattern that grade 5 was sort of okay, grade 6 was pretty bad, and then grade 7 was relatively good, grade 8 was pretty bad, grade 9 was relatively good, grade 10 was horrible, And then grade 11 was probably my best year before leaving the yeshivish situation. And then after that, it just became sort of a blur of Hasidishness and whatever, which is a completely different structure. And so I was interested, I was invested in what I was doing. But what made the odd years better than the even years? I don't know. I mean, I've heard Rebbeim say that grade 1, you learn how to read Chumash. Grade 2, you practice. Grade 3, you start to learn Mishnah. Grade 4, you practice it. Grade 5, you start to learn Gemara. Grade 6, you practice it. And every odd year, you're learning a new skill, and then the even year, you're practicing it. Maybe that's what it was. I was enjoying the novelty of the odd years. I don't know if that's the case. I think it was more that I gelled with the Rebbeim who I had, or there are maybe other things going on in my life that helped those years work out. I definitely know that like grade 6 was a bad year just because they put kids together in a class who never should have been together. Like in Oklahoma City, we have a lot of different groups, right? It's an out-of-town community, but there's lots of different groups of families there. And you have families who are very, very yeshivish, driving old, I think they call it the Rebbitzin Rocket station wagon. You ever heard that? The old
I can imagine.
road
Yeah.
mess. There was a wood panel, like 11 kids and a ladder strapped to the roof and like a trailer behind, and they're all going to Lakewood and playing basketball in their dress shoes. And they're like Yiddish and they know Yiddish and they have like 1,000 cousins and they're going to Chassidic and they know how to learn and everything. And then you have other families that are like, they build Oklahoma City and they own the town. And I'm not going to say they drive around in Rolls Royces, but they could if they wanted to. And they're just operating on a different level. And then you have this third group where there's just sort of, like let's say Balchuva background or middle class, father like went to university, has a degree, and like they're not knocking it out of the park. They're not super wealthy. They're not super yeshivish. They're just sort of, you can call them Harrys if you want. But they're trying to make it, and they just don't really fit into any group. And of course, they could try to wheedle their way into the yeshivish group or try to suck up to the rich group. And I would rather the kid who wheedles his way into the yeshivish group, because the guys who try to play the rich game, it doesn't look good on them. I experienced it a lot, because in the day school where I was, there wasn't really a lot of that. Like the kids were into like Power Ranger lunchboxes and sports and TV shows and movies. And it was just, if you're a cool guy, you're a cool guy. You're not a cool guy, you're not a cool guy. And then, I'm going to go on a lot of tangents tonight, and you're probably going to talk like 10 words the whole time. So there was a lot of differences between the two schools. Definitely a hard time focusing in school, especially when it came to Gemara. I struggled with Kriya. They took me out for remedial Kriya. I don't know if it helped or not. I was definitely embarrassed that I was going out. It may have gotten better. Definitely never really got Rashi clear. Part of the problem was that when I switched schools, they kept me back a grade and then jumped me a grade. And that sort of messed me up. So I never really learned how to do Mishnayos, and I never really got comfortable just reading Rashi fluently. So like Rashi letters for a long time, Samach and Endamems, Zions and Vavs, it was a mess. And I really did not like Rashi letters. I didn't know how to read them properly. And my Kriya B'chol, I don't think I was a bad reader. I don't think I had enough practice. And then you jump into Gemara, and once you're in Gemara, nobody's practicing Kriya anymore. Maybe they are now, but it's much more to the concepts and the ideas and so on. And I don't think I hated Gemara. I think I liked Gemara. Right when I started Gemara, I thought it was really interesting. But then when it got to a point, so I remember in grade 6, we had a Rebbe who would make us punctuate the Gemara, and he'd bang on the desk. We get to a comma, and then he had another thing, you had to make the period, and you had to make your own nakudas. And I was like, all the steps to understand the Gemara, plus being able to read these words in Aramaic without punctuation, without nakudas, was very, very difficult. So I could definitely understand concepts, and I could understand the Lumdish ideas. But when it came to putting it all together, it was very difficult. In grade 7, we're talking about the classes being separate. In grade 7, they separated the classes. So we were just all the losers together. We had a Rebbe who sort of liked us, or I don't know if he liked us or not, but he reached out to us and worked with us on our level. There were a lot of characters in my class. And in that environment, I didn't feel the stress of the social issues going on. And I was able to sort of focus on the learning. I don't know if I was focused on the learning, but the Rebbe, he was a very environment type of Rebbe. He wasn't Chassidic, but he was like a Yerushalmi type, like a literal Yerushalmi, and he had a lot of good stories, creepy stories, and he kept us engaged and sort of tried to coach us along. He was definitely like a holistic type of Rebbe, like a little bit of like new ideas. I don't think he knew that he had new ideas, but I think he was coming, like, he would sing with us, he would be nice and very environment. That was what I liked. Then grade 8 was like, there was like a high level of learning, and my Rebbe only had us half a day. I was reading books in class. I was checked out. When it came time to get into yeshiva, I tuned in for a little bit, studied, was coached my way into us, taught in the yeshiva, and that was that. Yeah, but school was definitely a lot of spacing out, a lot of reading books, a lot of sneaking into the library and reading books during class. reading books under my desk, drawing pictures, finding people to schmooze with in the hallways. We could spend hours just talking about elementary school. Each question here is really like 2, 3 hours, and even then you haven't really done it justice. But if you think that's enough, we can move on to high school. That's good.
I guess just in a little more detail, what does a good year look like and what does a bad year look like? I guess you
A good
described
year,
what a bad year
a
looks like.
good
What's a
year
good
is
year look
not as
like?
bad. A good year is not as bad as a bad year. A bad year means disaster. Like
Right.
report cards that are just horrible that you want to hide. Being called to the principal, getting into trouble. So like I wasn't this hyper kid, but I got into fights every once in a while. I think it was maybe just like a social thing, trying to show that I'm a somebody because I'm not of that. So you get into fights. It wasn't a jungle, but there were things that happened, and it was more of a laissez-faire type of environment in the yeshiva and the cheder. A good year means that it wasn't a complete waste, right? So I definitely wasn't crushing it. I wasn't doing the best that I could. Well, I mean, I probably actually was doing the best that I could at the time. But it means I didn't hate school. It means I wasn't dreading school all the time. Even though in grade seven I did miss a few weeks, but that's a different story. But I wasn't dreading school. There were good things. I had friends who I can get along with. I wasn't being bullied. Actually, in grade five, I had a strong bullying thing. But yeah, it just means it wasn't so bad. It wasn't. I didn't like school. I didn't hate school so much that I'd try to light it on fire. But like sitting in class for 2.5 hours, it was horrible. We had one Rebbe who would take away. You had to have your watches put away, so you shouldn't know how much time was left, because apparently you could focus better. That was the worst. It was like, how am I going to sit for so long? Just like, just sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting, and you're just toting the Rebbe out, and he's just droning. So when he was talking about something interesting, great. But when things were going off, yeah, that's sort of it.
Wow. Okay. Yes, moving on to high school. Tell me more.
Yeah, so high school, yeshiva, there's a lot more freedom, right? Because you're learning with charusas. So in grade nine, we would start off. I think I'm trying to remember what the Seder was. If we had 1 hour with a charusa and then we went to class, or we had class shir and then we had a charusa and then we went back to shir. Either way, like the morning Seder was a little bit of a disaster. I had a charusa. I don't know if he was. I think he was actually on the spectrum. I'm almost sure he was on the spectrum. He would like take like a compass, like for drawing angles, and like poke his hand with it. He wouldn't change the sweater. He wouldn't change his hat. He refused to wear a tie. Like a lot of sensory things I noticed, like looking back, that I think he was probably on the spectrum. But he was a good friend. Like I don't think our friendship was healthy, but he was a good friend, and it was good that we had each other because we both weren't necessarily fitting into yeshiva. And later on, when we went our separate ways, I think it was healthy for both of us. But we would just sit and schmooze for hours and hours and hours whenever we had Harusa time. We would try to learn, and then we'd get off topic so soon. And he was a smart guy, and I was a creative guy. And together we would debate anything under the sun. And this is something that I discovered in my ADHD Bibles that I've been reading, that boredom is the worst thing in the world. Better to start a fight, better to have an argument than to be bored, right? So we would argue about politics. That was the time when George Bush was president in the United States, and arguing about Republican versus Democrat. And again, like in Oklahoma City, most of the kids in yeshiva weren't that into politics or whatever, but my friend was, and I decided to get into it just to be able to debate him. And I would always take the side of the right wing. He would be the left wing apologist. I would like rip him to pieces. Then one day he went on a road trip with his parents, and they listened to Rush Limbaugh, and he was flipped, and he got flipped to become a right winger. He became like a libertarian. So I had to flip immediately, because just like getting along with him, that was no fun. So I immediately flipped and became like a complete liberal fluffhead, and I debated him on everything that he was saying. And I realized now we were just stimulating each other with our arguments, right? So that was a lot of grade nine. One great thing that happened in grade nine, and this may have any friends from Oklahoma City who are listening, they may recognize this Rebbe. This Rebbe had, in the morning we were learning, I think we were learning Bava Mitzvah. Afternoon we did Masechtas Barachas, which I don't know why they don't learn with kids more earlier, because it's so pleasant to learn. You're learning Bava Mitzvah, learning Bava Kama, learning the quote unquote Yeshiva Shemasechtas. And if Chas Hashem, there's like a little bit of Geshmak I got it, we're not going to learn that part. Part pulling your grade apart. Obviously, there's a mile in that. For kids, like usually, it's great to learn the interest. My world became alive. Like Gemara, actually, people always, but then we got into some of the really cool stories that you get in Masechtas Brachos in the third parak, and later on, it became definitely more interesting. And our Rebbe, he allowed us to take notes, and if you took notes during class, well, he didn't. You had to take notes, but if you took notes, he would allow you to use them on the test. And at first I was like, I can't take notes. I can't use them on the test. But then my mother started to bribe me. I think it was $1 if I scored over 80 or over 90, which is nowadays, that wouldn't fly. You'd have to like pay a kid like $20 or more to get him to do something like this. But I fell for it. And I started to take notes. I basically just wrote down everything the Rebbe was saying, or not. And I started to doodle. So I came to the point I wasn't even opening up my Gemara during Shir. I would sit down with my notebook and listen and write down everything the Rebbe was saying. If I understood it, great. If I didn't understand it, write it down anyways. And it came to the test, I knew that I could just look through that notebook and look for my keywords, find them, and copy them in to the test, and I'll get a good mark on the test. And that was very cool because I was getting the test for the first time in a few years.
What grade was
And
this?
also, like the notebook was full of, this is grade 9,
Right.
and like the notebook was full of incredible doodles.
Right.
And Oklahoma City, obviously, we're really into football, so I drew a lot of pictures of football players. And my Rebbe one time he came over and saw what I was doing. I felt a little bit like a dork, but it didn't stop me. That was a similar time when Harry Potter was starting to become big. And I remember he took a few swipes. He didn't really know what it was. He just knew that everyone was into it. The Herschel Kader, a Kader is a Potter. And he said, Herschel Kader, he's going to win if he's going to lose, whatever, it's all shtusim. I was thinking to myself, like, I knew what he was saying was true. And this is something that comes back to ADHD. They say that in the books that I'm reading, I can't use the language that they use, but they have a good something. They can't handle people who are not honest. When people are, let's call it, like when people are bluffing or just trying to con you or just saying things that they don't really mean, a lot of people with ADHD, they see right through it. And I saw that my Rebbe really meant it. And he could understand why boys were into it. But in my mind, I was thinking, him making fun of it is not going to make me not like sports or not like the books that I'm reading. I'm still enjoying them. I understand that he is honest from his standpoint and that it's something I shouldn't be doing. But at the same time, I honestly like it. And him knocking it is not going to change my mind. So that was an interesting way where like some guys would just be like, oh, this Rebbe, he's a crazy head because he tells us not to like football. No, he's not crazy. I see now I had the ability to sort of look at the Rebbe, appreciate where the Rebbe is coming from, appreciate where I am, and I could understand both of us at the same time. But anyway, that was grade 9. Grade 10, more Charusa time and a Rebbe with a lot less structure. I don't think we had any Gemara test the whole year. Bad news. Just the same Charusa, and it was a really bad year. Like the Rebbe was really funny, and I liked the Rebbe, but it wasn't good. Again, I was getting paid for taking notes, but there was no test, so there was no accountability. And this probably comes back to the idea of structure, right? That ADHD people need structure. Like, I don't like structure. I mean, I probably like structure, but it's very hard for me to create my own structure. But if there's a structure that I can work inside of and be matzliach, that's great. So I think this Rebbe himself very likely had some sort of ADHD, more likely the hyperactive type, the stories that he told. And he was a great Rebbe. And like the guys were like the really focused learners. I think they got a lot from him. But me, it was just like licensed to go crazy. So like during Seder, we just sort of waste a lot of time with my Charusa. And then in Shir, just sort of either space out or take notes. But the notes, there was no purpose for the notes because there was no test. And the year was just like sort of a disaster. And the Rebbe really, really, really felt that I was falling off the wagon. And I felt like I was also falling off the wagon. Like guys in yeshiva would make fun of me because I was just sort of roaming the hallways. I hated being in Shir, like go outside, read, like find novels, sit and read a book in the washroom, or find something to schmooze with in the coat room and just get through the day. It was so hard to get through the day. At the end of the year, he called my father in. It was like this serious meeting. It's like, I don't know what's going on with him. We don't know what's going on. And I knew what was going on. And there was more to the picture than just ADHD, but I knew that I wasn't learning to save my life. And it was just not a great year. And then I don't know what it was, but in the back of my mind, there was always this idea that at some point you're going to have to turn the engine on. You're going to have to start. Bring this another point. Famous rule. I mean, you probably know this. What's the rule about maturity and ADHD?
30% behind their peers, according to Dr.
Yeah,
Barclay.
there's a lot of different numbers, either 4 years or a certain percentage, or 4 to 5 years or so on. So again, I'm in grade 10. Am I 16? I'm turning 16. I'm probably a 12-year-old, right? I'm a 12-year-old or 11-year-old in grade 10. And like there's guys in my class who are like major yeshiva guys. They have like a kaivis mafarishim. They're learning through it. They're taking notes. They're recording. Sure, they're writing it over. I'm just like in my mind, I'm like, I would love to be that guy. Just I don't see how I could ever do it. And I don't think I thought it was stupid, but I didn't think I was smart either. And it was very hard. And like I felt like there's no way forward for me to be matzliach in this world. Like I don't know how I'm going to be matzliach here. And it was just like, I don't know if it was yish, but it wasn't great. But for some reason in camp that year, there was a different inyan. that was going on in the background that like somehow in my mind, what really happened was I had a friend, this friend of mine who I said was probably on the spectrum. He had a younger brother who was probably ADHD hyperactive. And he was like a holy terror. He was, oh my goodness, and I was schmoozing with him once in a while. And there was a situation going on in his class in grade 8. And there's just like the whole class was like out of control. That was a legendary year. Whatever school I was in, the class 2 grades lower than me, they were always off the charts. They're always fighting, getting into legendary trouble, doing things that you can not even imagine. And I think there was a kid in this class who really crashed and burned that year. Like again, because it's going to be a public, there's going to be a public podcast. We can't go into a lot of details, but there's a kid who crashed and burned the way that you would not expect a kid in grade 8 to crash and burn. And I think that was a little bit of a wake up moment. Like is that what I want to happen to me? Do I want to be that guy who's crashing and burning? I decided that I'm going to try to take care of myself. I didn't know what to do different. When I went to camp, like the first 2 years in camp, I hadn't done a lot of learning. I had gone to camp 2 years previously. And that year I was like, I still wasn't learning, but I tried to come with like a little bit more of like I don't even know I don't think there's a name for like this type of like outlook in Yiddishkeit. Whereas like, I don't know how to learn, but at least let me be a Erlich. It's probably like a Balabatisha guy, you know, again, let's call it a Harry. We're going to insult everybody over here. The guy, he doesn't know how to learn. He wishes he knew how to learn, but like, let's at least keep Shabbat. Let's keep kosher. Let's give tzedakah. We're going to be okay. And that was sort of my take in camp. Like, I'm going to try to be a good Jew, you know? And it was a decent summer in camp. And coming out of camp, I don't know why, I don't know when, that was when I was like, I'm becoming Chassidish. And that was like my explanation why everything until now had not gone well, because I wasn't Chassidish. And Chassidish people, they know how to do it. And honestly speaking, if you're ADHD, the Chassidish Welt is probably a better place for you than the Yeshiva Welt. I'm not trying to sell anybody. It's just that there are more opportunities for you to not feel like a failure. Because if the only success is sitting in shir for 2 hours and taking notes and being focused and learning and crushing it, you know, if you're not getting treatment properly and you don't know what you have, you don't know what's wrong, you may feel very frustrated. But in the Chassidish world, like I like to think that music. I love to sing. You know, there's this focus on davening. Oh, let's not even talk about davening was such a disaster for so many years. You know, we need to add a question here right now. Okay, we're gonna ask a question. What was your relationship with davening? Okay,
Yeah.
you're gonna remember to ask that. Okay, because davening is a whole thing. I think a lot of people with ADHD can relate to this.
Oh, you bet. Yeah.
Yeah, davening is like a whole Indian. I think Ben Shapiro, like when they were talking to him, he said his part of Yiddish. I don't think he's ADHD. I think he might be on the spectrum. Somebody tried to diagnose him, but he said he has an issue with davening also. Like a lot of people have difficulty with davening. But I was like, no, we're going to focus. Davening is going to be this geschmack thing, and you're going to daven loud, and it's going to be geschmack. And it wasn't like, and then like you're going to burn and like even whenever we were learning Musar, it was always like, and when you come to the Ulamah, and this and that, I've never experienced Musar in a more positive way. And like now, I love Musar. I'm listening to Shir. So this is something that changed in grade 11. Anybody from Oklahoma State is going to know exactly who I'm talking about. Because like if you follow all the clues that I've been dropping, you're going to figure out exactly who I am and where I am. And if you meet me, I'm going to know. But in grade 11, our Rebbe was a tzaddik. So like every Rebbe I had was a tzaddik, but this one's like, he personifies a tzaddik. Just like super honored, super soft-spoken, very kind, very caring. Just like, I would say like Rabbi Aryeh Levine. When I was a kid, we had a Rebbe who told us a lot of stories about Rabbi Aryeh Levine. So I would say this is probably the closest to Rabbi Aryeh Levine for any of my Rebbes that I had. You know, not the most wild, not the most crazy Rebbe, but like the most just like tzidkus, you know what I mean? Just always soft-spoken, always caring. And he learned with us, Chavis Alvavos, Shara B'tachan, which apparently is not common in yeshivas, because most people in yeshivas, they're like, what do you need to have B'tachan for? You're just learning, right? You're not working. But he loved Shara B'tachan, and I lapped it up. I'm like, this is Musar? How in the world is this Musar? I thought Musar was all about burning in Gehenna and about coming back down for a Gilgal because you messed things up and all the horrible things. And this is incredible. And I really, 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 really enjoyed Shara B'tachan. And coming back now, even now, I have a set of shirim in my car now that I bought a few months ago on USB and Shara B'tachan. I'm listening to it. It's fantastic. So shout out anybody who wants to enjoy their life and wants to not hate Musar. Learn Shara B'tachan, listen to Shir Shara B'tachan. It's fantastic. It's so good. It makes you, really centers you and helps you go through life and not be a complete mess. We're still in high school, right? We have to come back to davening.
But yeah, let's move past high school into adulthood. Just watching the clock.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this is gonna have to be a two session podcast unless you don't want me anymore. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. By the way, big thing about ADHD, distortion of time. You know about that one?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. But when you're in the
Kind of
zone,
do that
you
for a
don't
living.
get the clock either. You got to just take the clock and dump it for now. We'll worry about the time later. Yeah, like when you're in the zone, like this idea of like you're in the zone, like time just stops existing. Yeah. So like if you want to say when was my first experience of hyper focus? Hyperfocus is like I don't want to call it the Holy Grail because that's a very Christian term, but it's the that's one of the things that makes ADHD incredible and horrible at the same time is this hyperfocus and like the stopping of existing of time. If you can just get into the zone, and I probably first had this when I was reading books, like when I started to get into like these these art scroll novels like Blackout and Gordian Knot and the Spider's Web and so on. I started to get into those. We have like a long novel that has like a twisted plot with like a lot of back and forth. And you get into that and you just get into the story and like suddenly like it's 5 hours later and it's dark outside and you don't know how you got there. And like you just feel great. Like when you're in that zone, like world the world is black and you're just in your world and you're completely there. And this is the magical zone that people with ADHD enter. And sometimes they get trapped in it, and sometimes it brings them down. And we're not going to talk about internet rabbit holes right now because that's probably for session number two. But yeah, internet can completely destroy someone with ADHD. YouTube can completely destroy someone with ADHD. Wikipedia can completely destroy someone with ADHD. Just like entering that hyper focus and like going down the rabbit hole. It could do it to anybody, but it definitely someone with ADHD. Yeah, so hyper focus, blah 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 blah. Grade 11. Yeah, so start to learn. Again, it was very hard to learn. I really trying, really really trying. But the Rebbe gave tests, and I thought I did really well, and I studied for the test, and I got like a 50. I was like, "Come on," because like I studied really well on part of it, didn't have the whole thing. Everyone was in and out, but definitely like a ruchnistic aspect. Like it was like a big year of Hisalis. I was like, I'm not listening to the radio anymore. I'm not going to read Goyish books anymore. I'm not going to follow sports anymore. And that was a hard one. But because everybody, of course, football season's big, so I would get my scores from somebody else who was following. Like I'm not going to get my scores firsthand, and so on. And then going into grade 12, when I switched over to the Chassidic yeshiva and going into Beis Medrash, which again, the Chassidic belt, it's a completely different structure. There's 3 years yeshiva katana, there's yeshiva gadol. It's not this is Beis Medrash / Mesivta. Went there. I wanted to prove myself, and this is another thing that your listeners with ADHD and without ADHD and yourself will probably recognize is that when ADHD people are inspired, when they want to prove something and they want to show it, that ability to focus becomes a lot better because they're stimulated, right? I want to go and I want to show that I am the best. I want to show that I'm not a loser. People from Oklahoma City are okay. They know how to learn. They know how to get up on time for davening. They know how to not be complete losers. And I was like completely stimulated because I'm learning a new culture, right? It's the freshness, it's the novelty. Dressing in a new way. I'm learning a new language. Got to learn Yiddish. Sink or swim. Everybody here is talking Yiddish. Every shir is in Yiddish. It's fantastic, right? It turns out that I probably actually do have a really high IQ, but I didn't think I was smart. But I was able to have definitely good with languages. I had to pick up Yiddish, learning the Nigunim, learning stories, learning to act a different way. I was like, and by the way, here's something. Again, we're not trying to knock anybody from a Baal Tshuva background. I'm coming from one. The difference between a well-adjusted Baal Tshuva and a non-well-adjusted Baal Tshuva is probably, I think, the ability to be socially aware and pick up on the subtleties. So if you have somebody who, like, again, in my shul, where I live now in OKC, we have lots of different types of people, and a lot of them are from, Ger Baal Tshuva type of backgrounds, and some of them they have that little sniff for the little details, and they could just pull it off and just blend right in. They know how to do the accent properly, know how to dress properly. They're not going to come to shul wearing white sneakers. They're not going to wear like orange earmuffs to shul. They know how to blend in, and there's other people that they can't pick up on that subtlety of the little details that help you blend in. And again, they're a treasured part of our community, but they're still going to be very obvious that they're coming from somewhere else. Whereas there I was, and I was like incredibly stimulated, fitting in, getting the language, getting the stories, getting the whole thing. And like, yeah, that period where I was in Europe in yeshiva for 6 months, I was on fire. It was an incredible experience. And like, when I think back to it, it's like great feelings. And was there ADHD going on there? For sure there was, but I was like powering through it. It was like nitro boosters on my car. You ever played a video game with the nitro boosters?
I have, yeah.
There you go. You hit the nitro booster, and I was just like flying high. Like I'm gonna crush this. I'm like, it's hard. I don't care. Give me harder. Give me harder. And like it was great. It was fantastic. And then after 6 months, I went back home, and had problems with getting a visa to go back to yeshiva. And in I could have got it, and I eventually got the visa. But in the meantime, I ended up staying in OKC for a few months, and then ended up in New York in yeshiva. And there, we had to play the dramatic music now. The star of my life, not my wife, is my Karusa, who saved me. Yeah, this sounds like a Waterbury song. Your mama's changed my life, you know what I mean? So it's a Karusa. This is a bacher who was 2 years older than me. And we met in camp. And I latched onto him because he had a violin. And where I was, playing violin was a very chashuv thing. And I didn't really want to learn violin, but I wanted to show that I knew how to play violin. And I also wanted to show him that I knew enough about music. So I would hang out with him and talk about violin. And I don't know, he was already a chassan, so he was on his way out of yeshiva. But he sort of latched onto me in a good way. And I don't want to say he made me a project. He said, "Hey, you want to learn?" He started to learn with me. And he just started to build me up. And like, again, I had a few chavrusas until then who had tried to build me up. But until then, there was either this dynamic where either my chavrusa was like a loser, right? And I was trying to work with him. And like, I wasn't really the guy to work with him because I didn't have enough kalim to work with him myself, right? I don't want to call them losers, but like people who were struggling, either they had maybe a learning disability, or they were also out to lunch, or they were also not interested in learning, or whatever was going on, and like trying to pick them up. Or it was a guy who was equally knowledgeable or more knowledgeable than me, and I was trying to fake it and keep up with them, but I didn't. There was like this imposter syndrome, which again brings us to another great theme in ADHD: imposter syndrome. Are you a fan of imposter syndrome?
And it is what it is. I don't like.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
you're just doing a podcast. Who says that you're even allowed to do a podcast? Because you're doing a podcast, everybody thinks that you're this professional for doing a podcast. I'm speaking your inner talk. I don't know if that happens to you, but this happens to me. And anything that I'm doing, especially if I'm doing well, imposter syndrome, it eats you up. It's like,
A lot of good company
well,
will
but
say.
if people would know that I don't really know what I'm doing, people would know that I'm faking it. And you're not really faking it, but you're faking it on your level. They would never want to talk to you. They would never, and it destroys you. So I was having that imposter syndrome with all my chavrusas, trying to pretend I knew how to learn and embarrassed to say anything I didn't know. And this chavrusa was like, "Hey, you got to work on your reading." I talk about the Kriya. I'm like, he would just like make me read long pieces of Gemara or pieces of a different sefer. I'm like, and that practice, again, I'm not stupid. And I picked it up pretty quickly. And my Kriya improves. Hooray. You know what I mean? And he like learn with me and like teach me how to learn. And then eventually, so he got married and I was still in yeshiva. So we had less shaykhs. And then when I became a chassan, he touched base with me again. And I started to learn with him. And he's very much like a do-it-yourself psychologist, psychotherapist, social worker, etc. And after I got married, again, became very close to him, learned with him a lot. And the second year in Kailo, he took me as a charusa. I don't know if he took it as a project. I think it was like a reclamation project for him. And he told me, he said, "By the way," you're probably going to laugh. You see where this is going?
Yeah.
By the way, he said, "There may be pills that I've been taking. You should really try them."
Oh, there it is. I actually didn't see that coming. I actually didn't see that coming.
He didn't see it coming. So yeah, so he's like for ADHD, like he just started to tell me what they were. It's sort of like caffeine. I'm like, okay, I don't know. He's like, don't you realize that like anytime you learn, you get off topic and like you schmooze and like you get into all sorts of different things. And he's like, I don't know exactly how it came up, whether he said it was medication for ADHD or if he said it was something like Ritalin. I'm like, Ritalin, that's the thing they give the kids who rip people apart in school. They can't sit still. It just makes you dumb or whatever. Don't give me that. He's like, no, it's really good stuff. He's like, it's going to help you focus. It's like caffeine. It's better. And so what I'm saying right now, for the record, anybody who's listening, you should not be taking your own ADHD medication without a prescription from a doctor for many reasons. First of all, there could be heart problems. If you have an issue with your heart, for example, an irregular heartbeat, the stimulant medication could be very harmful, leading to illness or possibly death. You should not do it. If you have maybe an issue with substance abuse and you get into the stimulant medications, that can be an issue also. Again, we really probably need to do a part 2 because I want to do a whole thing on ADHD medication. But again, these are issues. So please don't do this on your own. If you think that you have ADHD, speak to your doctor. They'll be glad to give you a prescription. And you may even be able to get your hands on some medication. But he gave me some. He's like, watch what's going to happen. You're going to take this in the morning and it's going to be completely different. I was like, what? He's like, yeah. I felt like I was doing something, taking some sort of contraband. And the first time, I think he gave me a Concerta. And I took it. And he's like, just start learning. And we were learning. And it was just like, I didn't feel this incredible need to like change the topic all the time, or like start talking about something else, or get up and make a coffee, or go to the bathroom. We're just able to go. And like we learned for like an hour and a half straight without a break. I'm like, pretty good. I didn't realize how good it was. He's like, do you realize it just happened? I'm like, whatever. I don't really feel very hungry right now. We could just learn for another bit if you want. I used to like be counting down the minutes. Like that was pretty cool. And then he tried with a different medication. I'm not sure what it was, but it was a pill. He's like, this is really strong. So I like break it into corners. He gave me like a corner of a pill. If this guy would have been like a shady drug dealer, I probably would have been dead. But he was a very, very, very ehrlich person. And he had gotten a prescription from his doctor. He's like, I have ADHD. I'm like, that was the first time I was like, you don't have ADHD. He's like, yes, I do. And like, we are so similar, just like he was like the same as me, just on a much higher level. And similar struggles in terms of learning and focusing. And that was like, eureka moment. And then we stopped after this is like towards the end of the month. This is like
How old are you when this is going on?
sorry?
How old are you when this is going on?
Turning 22. So this is right before I had my second child. And then in the summer he went to the country and I was sort of left with a carusa and a supply of drugs. And also I didn't have insurance and I wasn't really going to the doctor then. Essentially it was just like that was like a cool experiment. Then I had my daughter and then when I got a job, I was like, I don't need that, whatever. That was cool though. That was definitely a cool experience. I wasn't even sure if I had ADD or not. But that was definitely like an eye-opening experience. I went to work and it looked like working in a store. And I was like, I never wanted to work. I always thought that working was a horrible thing. I did not want to work because I didn't think I would be successful in work. And I really don't like work. And I thought that I was lazy. And it turns out that I'm not lazy. It's just that I don't like things that are boring. So I was working in retail in New York and semi-illegally off the books. And the hours were long and I was abused. But there were parts of it that were great. So when there were customers and it was a busy day, like the time flew. You're in again, you get in the zone. It's just like and you know what you're doing and you feel you're being successful. So that was a great feeling. Days when there was nobody there, that was horrible. It's just like in Yiddish they say "stipping the tzat," pushing the time, waiting for the day to be over. There were some great ADD slip-ups where I got in a lot of trouble for making mistakes, like forgot to give people a certain piece of information or forgot to file something and got in a lot of trouble. But the place where I was working was a very dysfunctional place. So among all the dysfunction, I was like a very high functioning person among all the other dysfunctional people. So I felt very safe. But then I got offered an opportunity to go work in insurance back in good old OKC. I'm like, oh, who couldn't pass up an opportunity to go work in insurance? Because everybody who works in insurance is rich. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but if somebody thinks that I can do the job, I may as well get a real job. So I went back to OKC, took an interview with an insurance broker or agent. He decided he liked me because ADHD people are very charismatic and it's so much fun to talk to them. And you don't realize the hot mess that they're going to get you into. And because it turned out that I'm not so stupid, I was even able to pass my licensing exam. I got my insurance license. And then the guy who ran the company, he was an absentee boss. So again, I'm not going to blame him. He'd been through a lot in his life. He was probably already in his 60s at that point. I think he was similar to Biden. The sun was setting. No, sun had set. He was in his 60s and he was just traveling the world. He had made some money in insurance already. And he had some workers in the office. And he would just, my first day in the office, he was there. And then after that, he disappeared for 2 weeks. And then he came back and he was there for 2 weeks and he disappeared for 2 weeks. And I was on my own. So this is my first time in an office with a computer, with complete internet access, with somewhat of a filter, just by myself with two other coworkers and just supposed to sort of learn the business on my own. And that did not go well. There was 2.5 years of ups and downs and ups and downs. And the company was going down. The boss was definitely an absentee boss. He cared, he tried, but if he would have really, really, really sat with me, like, the first half year and just like day by day worked with me, coached me, maybe it would have turned out differently, but it didn't. I definitely got good at insurance, but our rates weren't good. I wasn't able to sell that much. People knew me to be a good person to talk to when they had a problem. I actually helped a lot of front people out when they had flooded basements and different things, and they were having problems with the claims adjusters. I was able to pull things off. And again, this is another thing that comes back to ADHD, crisis mode. ADHD people love a crisis. A good crisis, it triggers the stimulants in your brain. Suddenly you're in the zone. Somebody has a problem. We need to take care of this problem. I could work, 8 hours straight, focused in the zone. But like a dumb down day where there's stuff going on. You get so distracted and there's nothing going on. I start taking long walks and coming back to the office because there was just nothing happening. And it was horrible. And it's like shtipping the tzat. At that point, I went to an industrial psychologist. There was an organization in OKC that was offering career coaching. And I was convinced that I was just like, I would forever be a loser. And they did a whole test on me. Really high IQ. I'm like, no way. Like, yeah, like He wanted to help high. But like, I'm either, but I eventually took my own IQ test. I don't think I'm Mensa, but I think I'm just on the border, like pretty high. I'm like, that's incredible. Like, then why is my life a disaster? But then he said, yeah, you make a fantastic architect. You make a great interior designer, all these things. I'm like, great. But like, I probably shouldn't be an insurance agent. He's like, not really. But I didn't know what to do because there was no way I was going back to university at that time, and whatever. And I decided that, I'm going to become an underwriter because that's like something that I blamed the whole insurance thing that I couldn't do sales. I said, I could be an underwriter. I'm smart enough. I could do it. Started to take courses. I was fired from the company or let go because they didn't have enough business, and started to take courses in insurance. Learned a lot about liability law. Learned a lot about property casualty insurance and automobile insurance. And I know quite a bit. And then ADHD, about 70% of the way through, fell off the wagon. But that was because I got a job, another retail job. Somebody felt bad for me. I didn't have a job. So I got a job in retail, and then it took over for 9 months, and I wasn't able to keep up with the course. And during the time previous to this, I was learning in a morning kollel, and there was a principal of another day school who was sitting next to me. And say what you like about ADHD people, they hate things that are boring. And guess what we were learning? Good old Masechtas process that I had learned my Rebbe years before. And we were learning all of the Geschmack Gemaras, and I was like acting it out and like doing voices and like making funny jokes. And this principal, he was like, you should be a Rebbe. I'm like, no way, I can't be a Rebbe. I'm a loser. Can't be a Rebbe. He's like, you should be a Rebbe. And that was like, yeah, maybe I could be a Rebbe. Like, no, it's no way I could be a Rebbe. I'm like the guy who flunked out of school. I'm horrible. I'm a disaster. And that was like going on the whole time in the back of my mind. Could I be a Rebbe? Could I be a Rebbe? I don't know. I can't be a Rebbe. Maybe I'll be a Rebbe. And spoke to a different Rebbe, and he said, yeah, we need to get you in touch with this certain principal in Oklahoma City. And, he likes Rebbeim like you. And eventually I interviewed with him and ended up as an English teacher, not as a Rebbe. And I started to sub in the morning also. And that's been happening the last 9 years, and it's definitely been a lot of growth. If you're ADHD, you want a job that's stimulating, keeping you on your toes, definitely. Chinuch is a great place to be. You're going to hate report cards. There's a lot of it that you're probably not going to like, but being around kids, great. Being around kids who have ADHD, also great. At the same time, you have the same challenges as them, and it can really come back and bite you. We're really running short on time. I'd love to do a follow-up session. We can go into a lot of details about my experiences in the world of chinuch, knowing that I have ADHD and seeing people have ADHD and seeing people who are in denial and seeing people who want to treat it with everything except for the known treatments and so on and so forth.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, Rabbi Shmulik Blackman, thank you so much for a great part one of a great story, and I'm looking forward to part two.
Yeah, all right. You can make me like a stand-in anytime you have like a downtime. You just come in and like schmooze about anything. It'll be a lot of fun.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, you can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nefesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer: podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.